A headline in the Jerusalem Post this morning reports, U.S. approves Rafah operation in exchange for no Israeli counterstrikes on Iran. Then I look at the Telegraph in London. It says, Israel delaying Iran revenge attack until after Passover. I'm joined now by Dr. Michael Oren, formerly ambassador to the United States from Israel. He's in his bunker in his great studio with the great lighting, which is the best studio, I think, in Israel. Good morning, Dr. Oren. I do not understand the wilderness of mirrors that we're in. I have a column at Fox that says it's now or never time for Israel. What is going on in your view?
I'm going to give you the 4 words I hate giving most, which is damned if I know. Really, damned if I know. You don't hear that often from me, right? And it is very confusing. And I could see various deals that could be cut. You know, the United States could say to Netanyahu, okay, do not strike back at Iran, less now, at least not in like some very provocative, inflammable way, and we'll make it up to you. And how could the United States make it up to us? It could make it up to us in terms of Gazan currency. It can make it up to us in terms of strategic capabilities. Now, I'm going to reveal something on this show. I've talked about it maybe publicly before, but never on your show. I several times tried to reach an arrangement with the Obama administration about acquiring strategic bombers. Israel does not have strategic bombers. It's got this wonderful Air Force full of wonderful, terrific little airplanes called F-15s, F-16s, and F-35s, which are, again, terrific aircraft, but they have short ranges and limited payloads. Especially the F-35 has a very limited payload because everything outside the airplane, takes away the stealth qualities of the aircraft. We don't have a strategic bomber that can bomb something from 50,000 feet carrying a 50,000-pound bomb. And I tried to get the administration back then to even lease us one of those B-52s, the B-1s, B-2s, and got nowhere. I was working on it with the Trump people until that administration ended. But that's something that Israel needs. And I think if that deal would go through, where the United States would provide us with several of those very large aircraft, that would send an unequivocal message to Iran that Israel now has a very keen ability to eliminate their nuclear program. And okay, maybe that would be worth it. Maybe worth it some American support for an operation in Rafah and to stop, calling into question our commitment to humanitarian law. Enough already. There are various deals that can be reached. At the end of the day, it was interesting. There was almost like a one line in the New York Times that you could have passed it by, and that is in a discussion Saturday night. It was not Netanyahu, but it was Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot from the opposition parties in the National Unity Government, the so-called moderates, who are pressing for an immediate and massive military counterstrike. And with the complaint that every day that goes by, the pressure on Israel to not react would mount. And I can't say they're wrong.
I think they're right. That's why.
My gut feeling is always this. My gut feeling is this: is that Israel should have responded and should have responded quite dramatically, smartly, but dramatically, smartly. And Iran is a target-rich environment, lots of oil facilities on the Persian Gulf. Need I go further? And that Israel should move into Rafah. I don't understand why we're waiting.
Dr. Oren, I don't either. I think it's now or never time, and that Israel will forfeit deterrence. Even if you get a bunch of old B-2s, or even they send you some B-52s and say work on them, that's nothing compared to what the mullahs will think about Israel. They will conclude. It really comes down to what does your enemy think. And your enemy will think you won't strike back. And the next time they hit will be worse. That's what I think. Does anyone discuss this in Israel openly about what Iranians
not just that.
think?
We go back. It's also going back to playing by the Iranian rules. And I've said this on this program several times. We have been playing by Iran's rules for 15 plus years. And it's not just Israel, it's the United States. And what are the rules? Iran shoots at us through its proxies, not through Iran. Shoots at us through its proxies. We fire back at the proxies. The proxies hide behind a civilian population. We end up killing some of those civilians, however hard we try not to. And we get branded war criminals. And that happens every single round. It's happened in this round with Hamas. And then Iran gets away scot-free, never pays any price. It can kill 3 American service people in Jordan. It can block shipping through the Mandeb Straits to the Houthi rebels, Iran never pays a price. And if the United States and the world, together with Israel, do not exact a price from Iran, Iran is just going to keep on doing it. And we're going to keep on losing.
Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has an undeserved reputation as a hawk. And I say undeserved because he is among the most cautious world leaders who've been on the world stage for a long time. You know him well. What is more of a threat to his coalition, not acting or acting?
Now it's not acting. Right now it's not acting, though apparently the Israeli public, according to a poll I saw yesterday, the majority of Israeli public is against a very dramatic response to Iran. But within his coalition, there are those who are pushing in all different directions. The Ben Gvirs and the Schmuttriches want to, among not just to want to respond to the Iranian attack and to enter Rafah immediately, they want to reestablish Israeli settlements in the Gaza Strip. And that's going to be an issue coming up. Mark my words on this.
Dr. Oren, correct me if I'm wrong.
And
Ben Gvir and Smotrich are to the Israeli politics what Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie are, except they're not anti-Semitic. Thomas Massey is anti-Semitic.
I would have said Greene and Massey.
Yeah, and so I don't pay attention to them. I do pay attention to Derry, who is the finance minister, and he is an observer in the war cabinet, along with Eisenkot and the Ron Dermer. And so he seems to be on the cautious side. Have I read the reports correctly?
That is typical Derry, though. Derry supported the Oslo Accords. He's been around for a long time. And he is a very moderate individual. That's why one of the reasons Bibi wants him in there. It's one of the reasons that Bibi fought to get him hard to get into the government, even though the Israeli Supreme Court voided his nomination on the fact that he has spent time in prison for several times for corruption. So, but he is a voice for moderation, and he's a very intelligent individual. I can't speak for his his financial dealings, but yeah, he's that voice. He's the voice of restraint.
Because I never heard this until I went to work for Nixon in the late 70s. I haven't asked you about it before because I've forgotten it for a long time. Sophocles wrote, "You don't know how good the day has been until the sun is set." So we don't really know what Netanyahu's reputation is going to be until the last act of the Netanyahu career is over. If this is the last act of the Netanyahu career, what's his political legacy if he goes out letting Iran strike Israel with 350 projectiles or 330 projectiles?
Let me speculate out of the box what that last chapter could look like. It could look a grand bargain with the United States, in which a NATO-like structure is made in the Middle East. It includes Saudi-Israeli peace. It includes understandings about the Palestinian issue and how to proceed toward it in a way that doesn't threaten Israel and Israel's neighbors, because a Palestinian state would threaten not just us, but virtually the entire Middle East. It is the way that the United States provides those armaments and those capabilities we need to defend ourselves against Iran. And there's a big White House ceremony. Maybe there's a ceremony in Oslo as well. And that's the concluding chapter. That's
not going to happen, right?
I just threw it out there for your perusal, for your enjoyment.
I'm thinking he risks going down as the boy who cried wolf, because he has mowed the grass until 10/7. Now he's launched the Gaza war, which had to be launched in response to 10/7. And now he's holding back. And I do not understand this. And I know I talked with Admiral Mark Montgomery, who you probably know, retired Rear Admiral of the United States Navy. You've got, allegedly, Israel has submarine-launched ballistic missiles. They've got ballistic missiles. They've got... Admiral Montgomery thought your F-35s had payload capacity that maybe you could damage the Iranian sites. But it depends on weather and cloud cover and the phases of the moon and all that kind of stuff. Are people talking about this in the Israeli media?
Not much. I mean, I think it's well understood in this country that Netanyahu is extremely conflict averse. There's some harsher terms they used about him, but conflict averse. And it's always ironic that the world thinks he's such a militant, so aggressive. He's just the opposite. And sometimes that works in Israel's favor, and sometimes it's questionable whether it does.
Now, if you're an Iranian, you're used to doing this. You're a strategic thinker. If you're an Iranian advisor to the Ayatollah Khamenei, and Israel does nothing. What do you tell them that tells us, the Iranians in this case, about Israel?
It says that we're an easy target. The question is how you hit the target next. Do you hit the target with 350 more projectiles? Some of those projectiles were extremely large, and 500 kilograms of explosive, enough to take down an entire neighborhood, never mind a building. And or you keep on doing what they did yesterday. Hezbollah struck a community center in an Arab village in the north, in which Israeli soldiers just happened to be billeted. What does that tell you? It means they knew those Israeli soldiers were billeted in that community center. It's a remote village. So they have intelligence on us, and they wounded 18 of these soldiers, some of them seriously. It's letting us know here's how we're going to proceed. And we're really going back to what we're doing before, is using our proxies to gnaw away at you, to render the entire part of the northern part of Israel uninhabitable. People can't live in Upper Galilee. 60, 80,000 people out of their homes. The army bogged down. And the IDF up north feels that kind of like they're sitting ducks, and that's playing by Iran's rules. We're back.
Now, that detail. The media keeps leaking out details about the strike on the community center. Originally, it was 4 hurt, 1 seriously. Now it's 19 soldiers. Is that the Israeli censor machine at work? Is that what's going on there?
I don't know. I know sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Usually you don't inform. We'll say the soldiers are wounded without releasing their names until the family has been notified. That's certainly the case of fatalities. I don't know, but I think what they're not saying in any of the press reports you're reading is, how did this drone know where to find these soldiers? And that, to me, is a very scary scenario to contemplate, that they actually know where in a remote Arab village our soldiers are billeted. And think about that, Hugh. That's the first thing that struck me when I read that article.
Dr. Oren, yesterday, Dan Senor interviewed Professor Galloway, a self-described, all right, Professor Galloway describes himself as a far-left progressive atheist. He's also Jewish, and he's had quite the awakening since 10/7 about what is the reality of Israel. Is that commonplace throughout the world, and is it especially commonplace in Israel that people have just completely abandoned any idea of a two-state solution and embrace the reality of the region in which they live?
For the Israeli left, the first punch came in October, a different October, October 2000, with the outbreak of the Second Intifada, and that followed immediately on the heels of an offer of a two-state solution by then Prime Minister Ehud Barak to Yasser Arafat, head of the PLO, mediated by Bill Clinton at Camp David. Israel was prepared to give the PLO about 96.5% of the West Bank, all of Gaza, and half of Jerusalem, to redivide Jerusalem, believe it or not. And Arafat walked away from it, simply up and walked away. And a month later, boom, the Second Intifada breaks out, and 1,000 Israelis are killed. And what the left had always predicated its belief that the conflict was about the outcome of the Six-Day War, the West Bank and Gaza. But since the Palestinians had rejected a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, it wasn't about that. The war was not about the outcome of 67, it's about the outcome of 1948. And that was a huge blow to the left, and very prominent leftists began to move the other way. So that was the first blow. The second, the two-punch of the 1-2 punch, came on October 7th, where Israeli peace activists, many of them living along the border, people who had flown kites over Gaza saying, we want to make peace with you, people who waited at the border to take Gazans to Israeli hospitals, people who invited Gazans into their homes because they were working in their communities, found that these same people they were inviting in for coffee were actually taking notes about how many people were in each house, who had a dog, how many kids, who had a gun, who didn't have a gun. So the terrorists knew everything, what was in every house. And that's a huge, huge blow to the Israeli left. It is still out there. And, it's going to be, I always say it's like the end of Fatal Attraction. Just when you think they're gone, the hand's going to come up and get you. But they're incorrigible. But it's a huge blow. And I don't think I always go, my own family is a good barometer, Hugh. They're kind of center left. And when I mention the possibility of a two-state solution, they look at me and they say, you're crazy. You're nuts. No way. Well,
let's go north for a second to Lebanon. If Israel is poised to invade Lebanon, have they if they possibly held back from responding against Iran because they can't deal with the Hezbollah threat. In other words, deterrence failed there too, and they're recognizing the reality of it. Sort of like France in 1941, they thought they were ready and they get rolled. Is Israel afraid they'd lose the war in the north?
I don't know if they're afraid to lose the war in the north. I think they're afraid that the price might be a little prohibitive because we're talking about 150 to 170,000 rockets. We've seen how accurate these rockets are. We've seen that their drones can pick off a community center. These rockets can target our vital utilities, airfields, oil refineries, Dimona, and they have 100,000 terrorists under arms. That's more than 3 times the size of the force in Hamas. And these people are very experienced in killing because they've been massacring Syrians for the last half decade.
All right, Dr. Oren, we're heading up to Passover. May you have a blessed one. I hope your family is together with that.
Thank you.
People want predictions, and I know they always want predictions. Mine aren't worth anything because I don't know anything. You know everybody. What do you think is going to happen here?
I'm optimistic by nature, and I think that Israel can reach a new understanding with our neighbors. I think that peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia is possible if the Israeli government can throw a little bit of flexibility. But the key to it all is in the White House. And what do I mean? Starting in January 2009, the first week in office, Barack Obama turned to Iran and said, let's reconcile. And that has been the policy of the Democratic Party pretty much uninterruptedly since then, for 15 years. If now there's somebody in the White House willing to say, has the guts to stand up and say, listen, this failed, this didn't work, and we have to move from reconciliation to confrontation, then the United States will find that it will regain its great power status in the Middle East. It'll have many countries that'll rally to its side, and we will stick together, and we will overcome Hamas, we'll overcome Hezbollah, we'll overcome Iran with that type of front. And that's my vision for the post-Passover season. Again, the Jewish people rescued from bondage, and this time bondage to horrible terrorist groups, to terrorism, and achieving freedom, true freedom, freedom from fear in our ancient homeland.
But let's close this way, Dr. Oren. If Israel does nothing, what do those hundreds of thousands of young men and women who went into Gaza and the survivors of the 10/7 massacre and the despondent, depressed, and I gather a lot of them have taken their own lives, who have survived this horror, what do they think of this government if it does nothing after Saturday night and it doesn't go into Rafah and it doesn't invade Hezbollah? Do they give up on elected officials?
Again, no. It's very different. Remember, I think I've said before that in the year before October 7th, during the great struggles over the judicial reform, the army was politicized. Units of the military, particularly commando units, the pilots said they wouldn't report for reserve duty. So the army was politicized. That genie did get out of the bottle. Now that it's out of the bottle, the army has a say. And it's not necessarily the pilots and the commandos. It's the grunts, it's the infantry, it's the tank and armored units and artillery. People who come from development neighborhoods. By the way, half of their officers wear a kippah. They're religious. And they're going to say just what you said. What did we fight for? What did we die for? Why do we watch our friends bleed? The statistics are coming out now about the numbers of Israeli soldiers who are wounded and grievously wounded, thousands. And they're going to say to the government, no, you cannot cut a deal right now. You can't run. We have to see this through, or else all of our sacrifices have been for naught.
Last question. I have seen Naftali Bennett everywhere. It seems to me you told me that everyone gets to leave Israeli politics once, like Bennett did, and then they get to come back. Is that what is going on here, the preparation for the return of a younger, more robust version of a Likud leader?
Yep, absolutely.
Will it work?
Absolutely. Well, he's got some challenges. The right wing of Israel feel betrayed by him. He ran as a right winger and ended up acting as sort of a center-left leader. So he's going to have to sort of get back into at least some of those good graces. It won't be entirely possible, but the question is, who does he take votes from? And right now, the way he's poised, I think he would take votes from Benny Gantz, he'd take votes from Yair Lapid, but he wouldn't take votes from Netanyahu or from the Likud. He has to get to a point where he can take votes from both sides.
All right, we will leave it there. Have a wonderful and blessed Passover, Dr. Oren. I hope the next time we talk,
Thank you.
we're talking about how Israel responded so devastatingly that Iran dare not ever attack it directly again. And who knows what next week is going to bring. We'll find out. Thank you, Dr. Oren.